Hello and welcome to Old Worlds for Sleep, your doorway to history, mystery, and stories that carry you through time as you drift off to sleep. Tonight, we step into the elegant yet suffocating world of Victorian England, where beauty demanded sacrifice and the smallest choices could change generations. Imagine waking in a chilly 1870 bedroom, frost tracing your window pane, the weight of layers and a tightly laced corset pressing against your ribs. A devoted maid prepares you for the day, from whalebone stays to towering petticoats, arsenic face powders to belladonna eye drops, all to meet the impossible expectations of society. But this isn't just a story of constraint. It's a story of quiet rebellion, of courage and innovation, where women began to question what it truly meant to be beautiful, and to breathe freely. Tonight, we follow one woman's journey from suffocating fashion to freedom, health, and hope, and discover how her small acts of defiance shaped a safer, brighter world for her daughters and granddaughters. So get comfortable. Adjust your pillows, take a deep breath, and let yourself step back into history. This is Old Worlds for Sleep, and our story begins now. The first thing you notice is not the cold of the London morning, though the frost on the inside of your window tells you the fire has long since died. It is not even the scratch of the horsehair mattress beneath you, or the faint smell of soot that lingers always in the walls of the townhouse. No, the very first sensation of the day is pressure, an invisible hand squeezing your ribs, reminding you before you even open your eyes that you are a Victorian woman in the year 1870, and your body is not entirely your own. Your lady's maid, Agnes, enters with the soft tread of someone who has already been awake for hours. She has lit fires, boiled water, prepared your gown. She looks exhausted, but she hides it well. "Time to rise, ma'am," she says, pulling back the curtain just enough to let in the pale winter light. The air cuts like glass against your skin. You shiver beneath the thin wool blanket. Comfort is a luxury reserved for dreams. Agnes lays out the garments of the day with practiced precision. First, the chemise, white cotton and plain, the only layer that will sit directly against your skin. Then drawers tied at the waist. After that, the real battle begins, the corset. Whalebone and steel, stitched in silk, designed to force your waist into a shape that nature never intended. It lies on the dressing table like a weapon, waiting to be used against your own body. Is it really necessary today? You ask, already knowing the answer. I am only visiting my mother. Agnes gives you a look that says this conversation is an old one. Your mother would be the first to notice if you were not properly dressed, ma'am. She is right. Your mother notices everything and comments on everything and then tells everyone else she knows. It is not worth the scandal. You sigh in defeat. Agnes holds up the corset, the silk gleaming faintly in the dim light. You steel yourself, inhale deeply, and step into your role for the day. She wraps it around your torso, and the first tug of the laces is manageable, just pressure. The second tug presses deeper. By the third, your ribs groan and your lungs can no longer expand fully. "Deep breath, ma'am," Agnes says, bracing her foot against the bedpost for leverage. You grip the post until your knuckles whiten. The laces tighten again and again until your waist measures 19 inches, 2 fewer than yesterday, but still short of the 18-inch ideal whispered about in ladies' circles. Feels like drowning while standing upright. "Beautiful," Agnes says with quiet pride, tying off the laces. You try to answer, but your breath comes shallow, your voice strained. You turn to the mirror. The reflection stares back, a woman transformed. Your waist looks impossibly small, your bosom exaggerated, your hips wide. The coveted hourglass silhouette achieved, but at what cost? You already feel lightheaded. The day has not even begun. Layer by layer, Agnes builds the armor of femininity. Cotton petticoats first, then heavier ones until the weight pulls against your back. A bustle attaches at your lower spine, a cage of metal designed to make your posterior more fashionable, though it ensures sitting will be a strategic exercise. Finally, the gown itself, blue silk, intricate lace, and 57 buttons that Agnes fastens with nimble fingers. The transformation is complete. You no longer resemble a human body. You are an ideal, sculpted by fabric and steel, ready to be displayed like fine china. Breathing hurts, moving hurts, even standing hurts. Yet in the mirror you are beautiful. Society's definition of beautiful. Your mind flashes back to the doctor's warning. Dr. Harrison, blunt and unsentimental, had once shown you sketches of women's bodies misshapen by years of tight lacing. Lungs compressed, livers displaced, ribs bent inward until they nearly touched. "These contraptions are killing you," he had said. Your mother had dismissed him as hysterical. Men, she argued, were always telling women what to wear, first demanding corsets, then condemning them. Who could take such inconsistency seriously? But you had not been able to unsee the drawings. "Now for your jewelry, ma'am," Agnes says, breaking your thoughts. She fastens earrings heavy enough to tug at your earlobes, slides a cameo brooch into place, drapes a delicate chain around your neck. The only choices truly your own are these small adornments, tokens from family, from friends, from yourself. They are crumbs of identity scattered on the banquet table of social expectation. When Agnes steps back, the room falls quiet. You gaze at the woman in the mirror. She is beautiful, yes. She is proper, yes. But she is also trapped, squeezed, reshaped, suffocating beneath layers of fabric and convention. Your ribs ache already, and the day stretches ahead in endless performances of propriety. Meals eaten in discomfort. Conversations held through shallow breaths. Hours perched on chairs designed for postures no natural body could sustain. You press your hand against the corset, feeling the unforgiving steel beneath. Somewhere deep inside, you wonder if all of this is truly necessary. But the thought passes quickly, smothered by habit and fear. For now, you play your role. For now, you descend the stairs, one careful, breathless step at a time, into another day of steel and whalebone. If the corset is your cage, Agnes is both its jailer and your reluctant ally. She holds the power of the laces, the keeper of inches, the arbiter of whether today you breathe shallowly or not at all. And yet, she is also the one who slips you moments of relief, loosening stays in private, pretending to fuss with your skirts so you can take one unguarded breath before the performance resumes. Agnes is already part of the furniture of your life. She has been with you since your marriage, brought along with your trousseau like another piece of dowry. Her hands are steady, her voice soft, her face plain in a way society finds comforting in a servant. But to you, Agnes is more than a pair of hands. She is the only witness to the private reality behind the polished exterior. This morning, as her fingers move swiftly through the lacing, you catch her reflection in the mirror. She does not look at you as society does, weighing your beauty against impossible ideals. She looks at you like a craftsman regarding the fit of a tool. 19 inches, she murmurs, measuring with her eyes, not a tape. It will do. You almost laugh at the understatement. It will do, as if your ribs are not screaming, as if your lungs are not already gasping. But you swallow the humor. Humor is another indulgence, and indulgence has no place in this rigid ritual. Later, as she layers petticoats and bustles, Agnes hums a tune under her breath. A folk song, perhaps, from the village where she grew up. You have never asked. It is not considered proper for mistresses to inquire into servants' pasts. Yet you wonder, did she wear corsets as a girl? Did she watch her mother's body buckle beneath whalebone and steel? Does she carry the same bruises, the same raw red lines across her ribs? Agnes, you say suddenly as she fastens the final button on your sleeve. Do you ever wonder what it would be like without all this? You gesture faintly toward the layers of fabric, the corset pressing into your flesh, the bustle scraping against your spine. Her hands still for the briefest moment. Then she resumes her work with careful neutrality. Sometimes, ma'am, when I see my brother running across the fields back home or climbing trees, sometimes at night I loosen my own stays a little before bed, just to remember. This quiet confession feels like a secret rebellion shared in whispers. Two women separated by class, united in suffering beneath the same system. The difference is only in degree. Your corset is silk and steel, hers plain cotton and whalebone. Yours is tightened for beauty, hers for respectability. Both bind the body, both steal the breath. You feel a sudden, dangerous impulse. What if all women decided not to wear them at once? The words tumble out before you can stop them. What if none of us gave in? They could hardly condemn us all. Agnes's eyes flicker to yours in the mirror, wide with alarm. Oh ma'am, you mustn't say such things, not even here. If someone heard, she lets the warning hang. Even in this private space, the walls have ears. Reputations can be ruined by whispers, and whispers often begin in the servants' quarters. Still, the thought lingers, dangerous as contraband. A society without corsets. A body unshaped, uncompressed, allowed to simply exist as it is. Impossible, of course. But every impossible thing begins as a thought, and you have just spoken it aloud. Agnes finishes with your hair, arranging curls and pins with deft fingers. You sit perfectly still, the corset forcing your back into unnatural straightness. Your scalp burns from the hot tongs, but you do not flinch. Pain is expected. Pain is invisible. Pain is the currency of beauty. At last, Agnes steps back. "Perfect," she pronounces. You glance at the mirror again. The reflection is flawless, the ideal of Victorian womanhood. Yet beneath the silk and lace, your ribs are bruised, your lungs restricted, your skin raw. Agnes knows this. You know this. No one else will. As you rise carefully, the weight of skirts pulling at your waist, you catch Agnes watching you with something like pity. Or perhaps solidarity. Her hands, roughened by years of labor, have shaped you into society's masterpiece. Yet those same hands loosen the laces when no one is watching, slip pamphlets into drawers, offer whispers of another way. The hand of the maid is both your prison and your salvation. And though you rarely say it aloud, you are grateful for her strength, her silence, and her small acts of rebellion hidden in the folds of duty. You descend the stairs, every movement measured, every breath shallow. The day stretches before you like a sentence to be served. But you carry with you the memory of Agnes's quiet words. Sometimes I loosen my own stays just to remember. And in that small admission lies the faintest glimmer of hope, that perhaps one day remembering won't be necessary. The mirror lies. It shows you a woman with an impossibly small waist, perfectly upright posture, and the delicate porcelain look that society reveres. What it doesn't show are the things happening beneath the silk and lace. The mirror cannot reveal the reshaping of bone and organ that has become the silent cost of beauty. You remember the last visit to Dr. Harrison. His office had smelled of ink and pipe smoke, a masculine domain where women entered only under duress. Your mother insisted you see him after fainting at the Henderson dinner party. "Weak constitution," she had said dismissively, as though weakness were as natural to women as breathing. Dr. Harrison had been brusque, uninterested in politeness. He pulled out drawings, crude but shocking. Cross-sections of women's torsos. The first sketch showed normal anatomy, lungs expanding, ribs arching outward, liver in its rightful place. The second showed the body of a long-term corset wearer. Ribs bent inward until nearly meeting at the center, lungs compressed to half their size, liver displaced downward like a misshapen organ trying to escape its cage. "These contraptions are not merely uncomfortable," he had said, tapping the page with his pipe stem. "They are killing you slowly and elegantly. A civilized suicide." Your mother had sniffed in outrage. Doctors have been complaining about women's fashions for centuries. It is hardly new. First they told us crinolines were dangerous near fire. Nonsense. Now they say corsets are a health risk. What next? Will they tell us to dress like men? You had not argued, though the drawings lingered in your mind. Perhaps the doctors exaggerated. Perhaps not. You thought of your own body, the fainting, the aching ribs, the monthly courses that had grown irregular and painful since you began tightening the stays. How much was fashion? How much was your own biology? This morning, with the corset laced tighter than usual, you feel it more than ever. Each breath is shallow. Each movement a negotiation with the metal cage around your torso. Even the simple act of eating breakfast becomes a trial. Eggs and toast sit uneasily in the compressed space where your stomach should expand. Your husband hardly notices. Hidden behind his newspaper, he remarks only on politics and business, topics that require no response from you beyond polite nods. In a strange way, you are grateful. Conversation would require more air than you have to spare. After he leaves for the club, you retreat to your writing desk. Beneath a stack of correspondence lies the pamphlet slipped to you by your husband's progressive cousin. You had hidden it quickly, terrified he might see, but you cannot resist looking again. The Rational Dress Society. The words alone feel like rebellion. Inside are arguments not of fashion, but of health. Diagrams of breathing lungs, letters from women who have abandoned extreme lacing, sketches of clothing designed to allow both beauty and function. You trace the lines of one illustration with your fingertip. A woman in a looser bodice, standing tall, her waist still shapely but not crushed. She looks alive in a way you cannot remember feeling. Could it really be possible? A knock interrupts your reverie. Agnes enters, bearing a tray of cosmetics. The familiar bottles and jars look more like a chemist's laboratory than tools of beauty. Ammonia creams, powders laced with lead, belladonna drops. "Shall we begin with the complexion, ma'am?" she asks, her voice neutral, her eyes betraying sympathy. As she applies the ammonia cream, your skin burns, a chemical fire spreading across your face. You force yourself to endure it as you always do. The powder follows, whitening your complexion to the fashionable pallor of someone too delicate to labor outdoors. Belladonna stings your eyes, leaving your pupils wide, your vision blurred, your head faint. By the time Agnes is done, you look radiant. You also feel faintly poisoned. This is the bargain, unspoken but understood. Your body is not a private possession. It is public property, a stage upon which society plays out its expectations. Your ribs may bend, your organs may shift, your skin may burn, your eyesight may fail. But so long as you appear beautiful, you have fulfilled your duty. Later, when you catch sight of yourself in the long mirror of the drawing room, you wonder how much of the woman you once were remains inside this rearranged body. Did your bones protest once before they yielded? Did your lungs fight for space before surrendering? Are you slowly reshaping not just your figure but your very sense of self to fit the mold pressed upon you? You think again of Dr. Harrison's words. Civilized suicide. The phrase feels too accurate. And yet, you know you will submit again tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. For now, resistance is only a thought, a pamphlet hidden in your desk, and the occasional loosened lace when Agnes dares. You rise carefully, ribs aching, waist aching, but posture flawless. In the eyes of the world, you are perfect. Only you know the cost. The dressing table gleams like an altar, but not to saints or gods. This altar is dedicated to beauty, and the sacrifices it demands are no less severe. Glass bottles catch the morning light, powders lie in porcelain jars, and silver tools glint like surgical instruments. To the untrained eye, it might look like luxury. To you, it feels like poison disguised as refinement. Agnes arranges the items with the precision of a pharmacist. She knows the order, the rituals, the mixtures that transform your face into society's ideal. Your mother sent this over, she says, holding up a small box with delicate lettering, Dr. Campbell's arsenic wafers. You raise an eyebrow. Arsenic? As in poison? In large doses, yes ma'am. But these are perfectly safe, they say, if taken sparingly. Many ladies swear by them. Mrs. Carrington's daughters, for example. You don't need to hear the end of the sentence. You've seen the Carrington girls. Pale, delicate, glowing with the fashionable look of half-death. You've also heard the whispers, one coughing blood, the other plagued by trembling hands. Perhaps later, you say lightly, setting the box aside. For once, defiance feels delicious. Next comes the cream. Agnes unscrews the lid of a white jar. The sharp, acrid smell of ammonia stings your nose before the cream even touches your skin. This one smooths the complexion, she explains, dabbing her fingers. You sit still as the burning paste spreads across your cheeks. Tears prick your eyes. It feels less like a beauty treatment and more like a punishment. Lady Caroline swears by it, Agnes offers, as if that might help. Though her maid told me it burned her skin raw for weeks before it settled. Then I must be fashionable indeed, you mutter, wincing. Powder follows. A fine dust, white as chalk, brushed over your face until every hint of natural color disappears. Containing lead, you know. The same substance that blackens ceilings and poisons children in old houses. Yet here it sits, brushed onto your skin daily, a badge of refinement. Too much sun is vulgar, too much color is unseemly. A woman should look as though she never breathed fresh air, never felt heat, never lived. The final touch for the complexion is rouge, mercifully harmless compared to the rest. Beeswax and crushed beetles, giving a faint blush to cheeks powdered ghost white. At least the beetles are not poisonous. You almost want to thank them for their sacrifice. Eyes, ma'am? Agnes asks. You hesitate. You already know what comes next. The small dropper bottle, filled with clear liquid distilled from belladonna, deadly nightshade. A single drop in each eye dilates the pupils, creating a luminous, starry look that men find irresistible. The price: blurred vision, light sensitivity, and eventual blindness if used too often. Just one drop, you instruct, tilting your head back. The sting is immediate, sharp as needles. Your pupils expand, swallowing your irises until your reflection looks half otherworldly, half deranged. The world blurs at the edges, colors too bright, outlines shimmering. You blink rapidly. Beautiful, Agnes whispers. Or half blind, you reply, though your lips twitch in the smallest of smiles. Humor helps, if only for a moment. Finally, the lips. A tiny brush dipped in red salve. Simple, harmless, made of beeswax tinted with carmine. The one part of the ritual that doesn't feel like slow poison. Irony stings sharper than the belladonna. The only safe cosmetic is made from crushed insects, while everything designed by chemists seems determined to kill you softly. By the end, you no longer look like yourself. You look like society's idea of you. Pale, wide-eyed, lips blood red, face smoothed and flattened of all imperfection. A doll, painted and polished. A perfect angel of the house. And yet beneath the paint, your skin burns. Beneath the pupils, your eyes ache. Beneath the rouge, your lungs still labor against steel and bone. As Agnes clears the bottles, you catch her reflection in the mirror. She watches you with a complicated expression. Admiration, pity, perhaps even envy. She must wear cosmetics too, though cheaper, rougher versions. She too poisons herself, though for different reasons. Not to impress society, but to appear respectable enough to hold her place in it. Agnes, you say softly, do you think our daughters will be doing all this 20 years from now? Her hands still on the tray. She considers. Hard to say, ma'am. My mother wore stays tighter than yours. Said in her day they'd lace until a girl fainted, then loosen just enough to wake her up. Horrible, yes, but fashions always change. Maybe this one will too. Maybe. You look at your reflection again, the mask of beauty applied with poisons, the body reshaped by steel. Maybe someday women will be allowed to breathe, to blush naturally, to see clearly without belladonna burning their eyes. Maybe someday. For now, the mirror shows only the angel of the house. An angel whose wings have been clipped by arsenic, ammonia, and lead. The title sounds divine, doesn't it? The angel of the house. Every Victorian magazine sings its praises. Every etiquette guide preaches it as the holy duty of a wife. To be the angel means to create a sanctuary for your husband, a place of calm away from the noise and dirt of the outside world. To be the angel means to embody beauty, virtue, grace, and selflessness. But you know the truth. Angels, if they exist, surely do not spend their days counting spoons and inspecting table linens. Your mother drilled the phrase into you as a child. Remember, darling, she'd say as she oversaw the drawing room polishing, a home reflects its mistress. Every cushion, every plate, every arrangement of flowers whispers to the world whether you are a competent wife. You had nodded dutifully then, not realizing that one day those whispers would weigh more heavily than the steel of your corset. This morning, after the ritual of dressing, you step into your role. The house must be managed. The staff must be directed. Every detail must be perfect. Not because you care about perfection, but because others will judge you, and by extension your husband, if anything is less than flawless. First, the kitchen. The cook greets you with a curtsy and a menu proposal. Duck with cherry sauce, perhaps, followed by a charlotte russe. Impressive but not ostentatious, a balance you've learned to maintain. Too lavish and you appear vulgar, too simple and you appear negligent. Even the choice of dessert becomes a political act. Next, the parlor. Curtains must be inspected for stains, the mantelpiece checked for dust. You remember Mrs. Henderson, who once ran her gloved finger along another woman's mantle during a visit. The gossip afterward had lasted weeks. One smear of soot had nearly undone years of cultivated reputation. You vow never to give her such ammunition. The accounts come next. Ledgers spread before you like battle plans. Coal deliveries, butcher's bills, wages for servants, all must be tracked with precision. Your husband gives you an allowance for the household, and you are expected to perform miracles with it. A broken teacup must be replaced without complaint. A shortage of flour explained without embarrassment. You manage it all, yet no one calls you a financier. You are merely a wife doing her duty. By midday, your back aches from moving through room after room, posture still forced by the corset, voice still pleasant, smile still fixed. The servants defer to you, but they also watch. You cannot reveal fatigue, irritation, or weakness. The angel must glide, never stumble. When your mother visits, she always inspects with sharp eyes. The hearth rug is slightly crooked, she'll say, or the flowers on the mantel have begun to droop. She means it kindly, or so she believes. To her, this vigilance is love, training you to succeed in a world where women are judged by how well they create illusions of effortlessness. You pause in the drawing room, breathing shallowly, admiring the room's order. The piano polished to a sheen, the carpet brushed free of lint, the silver candlesticks gleaming. It is beautiful, yes, but it is also a cage of another sort. Just as your corset reshapes your body, the angel role reshapes your mind. Your thoughts shrink to the dimensions of rooms, meals, and curtains. Your purpose narrows until it can fit inside a silver sugar bowl. Agnes enters quietly, carrying a letter. From your mother, ma'am. You sigh before opening it. As expected, it contains advice. Be sure the Henderson dinner tomorrow is prepared with every care. Remember, Mrs. Henderson notices everything. And wear the blue silk, it flatters you. You crumple the letter slightly in your hand. Even from a distance, your mother directs your every move. Later, at dinner with your husband, you mention the preparations. He nods absently between bites of roast. Good. The Hendersons are important. Henderson has connections I want. Make sure everything is perfect. The words sting, though you don't let it show. Not praise for your efforts, not gratitude for your endless labor, but a command. Perfection because it benefits him. The angel of the house is not honored, she is expected. As you retire for the evening, corset finally loosened, you think about the irony. Angels are meant to fly, free and unburdened. Yet in this world, angels are bound by steel, weighed by fabric, tethered by duty. Your wings are folded tight against your ribs, clipped before they could ever unfurl. And tomorrow you will rise again, lace again, polish again. The angel of the house, shining and suffocating all at once. Your mother's townhouse is warm when you arrive, the coal fires tended faithfully by her staff. The air smells of lavender polish and faintly of mothballs, comforting and oppressive all at once. She greets you with the same precision she applies to everything else. A kiss on the cheek, a quick appraisal of your dress, and a comment sharpened like a needle. Acceptable, she says, eyeing your blue silk gown, though your complexion could use improvement. Have you tried the arsenic wafers I sent? You force a smile. Not yet, mother. I've been feeling a little unwell. All the more reason, darling. Nothing enhances a woman's beauty like a touch of delicacy. Men adore the fragile look. The words hang in the air like perfume turned sour. You think of Mrs. Carrington's daughters. 3 proposals gained, 1 coughing blood. Beauty has its price, and your mother seems to consider it a bargain worth striking. In the parlor, she begins her true work. Not hosting, not welcoming, but lecturing. The Hendersons will expect refinement tomorrow. A proper dinner, impressive but not ostentatious. Duck with cherry sauce, perhaps, followed by Charlotte Russe. And be sure the silver is polished to perfection. Mrs. Henderson is known to inspect mantles with her finger when she thinks no one is looking. You nod, already aware. Yet you let her speak. This is her domain. The endless passing down of instructions, the chains of expectation forged generation after generation. Remember, a woman is judged as much by her home as by her appearance. A spotless parlor reflects a spotless mind. A well-arranged table reflects a competent wife. She pauses, sipping her tea with delicate precision. And, of course, wear your corset properly tightened. No husband worth keeping admires a slovenly waistline. The words strike like blows, not because they are cruel but because they are ordinary. They are the air your mother breathes, the truth she never questions. For her, the corset is not a cage but a symbol of discipline. Beauty through suffering, virtue through discomfort, duty through self-erasure. You watch her move about the parlor, graceful despite her age. Her waist is still impossibly small, her posture as rigid as ever. Decades of compression have shaped her body permanently, ribs bent inward, lungs accustomed to half-breaths. You cannot recall ever seeing her slouch, sigh, or breathe deeply. Perhaps she no longer can. Henry works hard, I trust? She asks, referring to your husband. Yes, mother. He's at the club this evening. As it should be. A man needs his freedom. A wise wife never questions her husband's absences. You think of the perfume sometimes lingering on his clothes, the faint lipstick stain once found on his handkerchief. Your mother's generation would dismiss it as a man's nature, a price for financial security. You keep your silence, lips pressed together beneath the rouge. Her lecture continues, a steady flow of instructions about menus, napkin folds, flower arrangements, and the delicate balance between appearing prosperous without appearing wasteful. She speaks with authority as though she is reciting scripture. In truth, she is. This is her religion: propriety, perfection, performance. As the afternoon wanes, you feel yourself shrinking, corset tightening, spirit folding under her words. Every sentence is a chain, linking you back to the women before you. Your grandmother laced even tighter. Your mother, proud of her endurance. And now you expected to carry the same legacy. When you finally depart, the winter air outside feels sharper but freer. The frost on the carriage window is almost a relief compared to the suffocating warmth of your mother's expectations. Agnes sits across from you, quiet, eyes lowered, but you can see the flicker of sympathy there. She knows the toll these visits take. At home, you peel off your gloves and sink into the drawing room chair, the weight of her words still pressing harder than steel. The corset you can loosen at night. Your mother's voice you cannot. It lingers long after the visit, echoing in your mind, whispering that you will never be enough unless you bend further, tighten more, erase yourself entirely. For the first time, you wonder if breaking free of corsets will be enough. What about the deeper corset, the one stitched into your very thoughts by your mother's voice? Perhaps those chains are the hardest of all to break. The day of the Henderson dinner begins long before the guests arrive. From the moment the fire is lit in the kitchen range, the house becomes a hive of activity. The air fills with the smell of roasting duck and polished silver, with a faint sting of beeswax used to shine every visible surface. Servants hurry up and down the stairs like clockwork pieces, each performing a task that no guest will ever notice unless it is done badly. And you, corseted, powdered, painted, are the conductor of this domestic orchestra. Agnes laces you earlier than usual, her hands firm on the stays. The blue silk requires a smaller waist, ma'am, she reminds you, as though your ribs need reminding. By the time she ties off the laces, your waist measures 19 inches. It feels like a victory you didn't want to win. Every breath is shallow, every step a negotiation with pain. Your husband inspects you with the same detached air he uses to review accounts. That will do. Henderson will notice. Not you. Not your discomfort. Only Henderson. When the Hendersons arrive precisely on time, the performance begins. Mrs. Henderson sweeps in first, her gown from Paris glimmering with imported lace, her waist cinched so tightly you can hear the faint catch in her breath as she compliments your gown. So becoming, she says, air kissing your cheek. You return the compliment, both of you smiling like dolls wound up to perform this dance of appearances. Her daughters follow, 2 girls in their late teens, corseted for the season. The older carries herself stiffly but with practiced grace. The younger, Clara, looks less certain. Her eyes dart nervously, her cheeks flushed beneath powder, her movements strained. You recognize the signs instantly. Tonight is likely one of her first evenings in a fully tightened corset. Dinner unfolds as expected. The men talk politics and business, their voices filling the air with confidence. The women exchange pleasantries about fashion, children, and servants, never venturing beyond safe, shallow waters. Servants glide in and out with practiced invisibility, delivering courses with precision. Duck with cherry sauce, followed by Charlotte Russe, just as your mother prescribed. But your attention is not on the food. It is on Clara. She shifts uncomfortably in her chair, her hands trembling slightly as she lifts her fork. She eats almost nothing, sipping water in small, shallow gulps. Her chest rises and falls too quickly, a trapped bird fluttering against steel bars. "Are you well, Miss Clara?" you ask softly when conversation lulls. She blushes furiously. "Quite well, thank you. Just a new corset." Her eyes flick to her mother, who nods approvingly. "Mother insisted I needed a smaller waist before the season begins." You force a smile of encouragement, though inside you ache with recognition. You remember your own first season, the dizziness, the nausea, the endless fainting spells disguised as delicate nerves. No one called it what it was: suffocation. Dessert is served, but Clara barely touches it. Her face has grown pale, her rouge standing out like paint on porcelain. She grips the table as though the room is tilting. You open your mouth to suggest fresh air, but before the words escape, it happens. Clara gasps, her eyes rolling back, and collapses in a heap of silks and lace. The dining room erupts in genteel chaos. Mrs. Henderson clutches her pearls, fluttering about ineffectually. Mr. Henderson frowns in irritation at the disruption. Your husband signals for servants, but you act faster. Loosen her stays, you command, your voice sharper than usual. Mrs. Henderson looks scandalized. In mixed company? Surely not. Would you prefer she suffocate? You snap. Already 2 maids are kneeling beside Clara, fumbling with the laces. The sound of stays unlacing is indecent in such company, but necessary. With each loosened inch, Clara's chest rises more freely. Her eyelids flutter, and she gasps for breath like someone nearly drowned. I'm so sorry, she whispers, tears in her eyes. Nonsense, Mrs. Henderson says briskly. Just a momentary weakness. Once you're used to proper lacing, these episodes will pass. You meet Clara's eyes. The hopelessness there mirrors your own reflections years ago. She is trapped in the same cycle, the same performance. And unless something changes, her future will look just like yours. The men, meanwhile, have retreated to the drawing room, their brandy and cigars undisturbed by the fainting of a young woman. To them, this is no crisis at all. Women are delicate, they say, as though delicacy were not manufactured by whalebone and steel. When Clara rejoins the group later, her corset retightened, though not quite to its previous extreme. She moves carefully, her smile strained. No one mentions the collapse again. The fiction must be maintained. Beauty without effort, grace without pain, women as angels who never stumble. But as you bid the Hendersons farewell, you press a small card into Clara's hand. On it is the name of a dressmaker Agnes discovered, one who quietly crafts health corsets for women bold enough to seek them. Clara tucks it into her glove, eyes wide with gratitude. Another small rebellion. Another whisper of change. When the house falls quiet at last, your husband pronounces the evening a success. Henderson seemed impressed. I believe this partnership will move forward. He smiles faintly. Though you fussed too much over the girl, it was only a fainting spell. Women are naturally fragile. You bite your tongue until it aches, resisting the urge to shout that women are not fragile. They are strangled. Instead, you smile, the angel once more, even as your body throbs from 14 hours of suffocation. Later, in the privacy of your room, Agnes unlaces the corset, her hands gentle. Deep red grooves mark your flesh, ribs aching, organs shifting back into place with painful relief. You exhale fully for the first time all day. Do you think it will ever change? You ask softly. Agnes meets your eyes in the mirror. It must, she says simply, for the sake of girls like Clara. The morning after the Henderson dinner dawns gray and damp, the kind of London day that seeps into your bones. Your body aches from the punishment of the blue silk dress. Every muscle feels bruised, your ribs sore to the touch, your skin marked with deep red indentations. Still, duty calls. Breakfast must be managed, accounts reviewed, and appearances maintained. Agnes enters with tea, her expression concerned. How do you fare, ma'am? She asks, setting the tray down. Like a soldier after battle, you reply, attempting humor, though the laugh turns into a wince. Agnes chuckles softly, but her eyes remain serious. It isn't right, she mutters, shaking her head. No woman should suffer so much for a dinner party. Her quiet rebellion steadies you. There's comfort in knowing you're not alone, that someone sees the absurdity. Perhaps one day, you murmur, we won't. Small rebellions begin to take shape in your daily life. You skip the arsenic wafers your mother insists upon. You refuse the heavy pearl earrings, claiming headaches. You leave your corset laced a little looser on mornings when no important guests are expected. Tiny acts of defiance, invisible to most but monumental to you. Agnes becomes your accomplice. She learns to arrange your dresses in ways that disguise slightly looser lacing. She discreetly tucks Rational Dress Society pamphlets into your writing desk. Once, when delivering linens, she whispers of another maid who loosens her corset at night and dreams of joining the movement. The network is spreading, one whisper at a time. Your daughters watch you closely. Eleanor, now 15, endures her training corset with stoic resignation. But she notices the subtle differences in your posture, your ability to bend more easily, your less frequent faintness. One afternoon, while arranging flowers, she ventures, "Mother, is your corset different? You seem freer." The question startles you. It feels dangerous, as though acknowledging change aloud might summon society's wrath. But Eleanor's eyes are curious, not judgmental. "Yes," you admit softly. "I've found a healthier design. Would you like to see it?" Her face brightens. "Could I have one?" Mine pinches dreadfully. Your heart swells with both pride and sorrow. Pride that she sees another possibility. Sorrow that she must still endure it all. "I think that could be arranged," you whisper, as though conspiring in treason. Emma, still young enough to escape corsets, notices even more dramatic changes. One day, when you lift her playfully into your arms, she squeals, "You can pick me up again. You said your dress wouldn't let you before." You laugh, twirling her despite your aching back. "I have better dresses now." Dresses that let me move and breathe and hug my favorite daughters. These moments, hugging a child, bending without pain, breathing deeply, seem ordinary to anyone outside your world. To you, they are revolutionary. The wider society, however, remains stubborn. At church, a neighbor whispers that your waist looks less disciplined than last season. At a charity committee, an older matron remarks pointedly, "Comfort is not a virtue, my dear." Your mother continues to send arsenic wafers and scolds you for looking too healthy. You endure these comments with polite smiles. But inside, something is shifting. Once, such remarks would have crushed you with shame. Now they strike you as absurd. Health is not a flaw. Comfort is not weakness. The very rules you once obeyed without question now seem laughable. Still, rebellion is dangerous. You recall Clara Henderson fainting in her corset, her mother's refusal to acknowledge the cause. To defy openly would mean social exile, perhaps even ruin. So you continue your campaign in whispers and subtleties. A looser corset here, a skipped cosmetic there, a pamphlet passed discreetly between gloves. One afternoon, Agnes brings news. Lady Russell wishes to thank you for the pamphlet. She says it opened her eyes. She wants to know more. Your pulse quickens. Another ally, another woman awakened. The quiet rebellion grows. That evening, as you prepare for bed, Agnes unlaces your corset with her usual care. The relief is exquisite, painful in its intensity. You sigh, rubbing at the bruised skin. Do you think it will ever change, Agnes? Truly change? She pauses, folding the discarded garment. My grandmother wore stays all her life, but nothing like these modern contraptions. My mother says the fashions were looser when she was young. Things do change, ma'am. Slowly. Then suddenly. Her words linger as you slip into bed. Slowly, then suddenly. Perhaps that is how revolutions always come, not with a single dramatic gesture, but with countless small rebellions accumulating until they cannot be ignored. You close your eyes, imagining Eleanor and Emma in a future where women can breathe deeply, move freely, exist comfortably in their own bodies. A future that feels impossible, yet wasn't every change in history once impossible? Your breathing deepens, unrestricted for these few hours of night. Each inhalation feels like resistance, each exhalation like defiance. Tomorrow the corset will return. But tonight, in this small rebellion of freedom, you dare to dream. London in the late 1880s hums with contradictions. On one hand, society clings to its rigid codes, corseted waists, endless etiquette, the angel of the house ideal. On the other, new ideas stir beneath the surface like a restless tide. Women whisper in drawing rooms, pamphlets circulate in gloves and handbags, and occasionally, a bold figure appears in public in something shockingly sensible. You find yourself straddling both worlds. By day, you play the dutiful wife and hostess, managing household affairs and maintaining appearances. By night, in the privacy of your dressing room, you read Rational Dress Society newsletters by lamplight, your heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. Agnes is your co-conspirator. She smuggles pamphlets past the cook, who would surely scold her for radical sympathies. She helps disguise your health corset beneath more conventional gowns, fastening buttons and arranging folds of fabric with a conspiratorial wink. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before sleep, she dares to loosen her own corset completely and sighs in relief. Just to remember what it feels like, she whispers. Your daughters are noticing too. Eleanor watches every subtle change, her teenage eyes sharp and questioning. She has begun experimenting with loosening her training corset when she thinks the governess won't notice. Emma, still in childhood, blurts innocent questions that unsettle the adults. Why do ladies wear clothes that hurt them? Isn't fashion supposed to be pretty, not painful? The room goes silent at her words, but you feel a surge of pride. Out of the mouths of babes comes the purest truth. At social gatherings, the whispers grow bolder. A friend discreetly mentions that her cousin in Edinburgh cycles in a divided skirt. Another confides that she no longer powders her face with lead, preferring a natural complexion despite her mother-in-law's disapproval. Each small story, each quiet act of rebellion feels like proof that you are not alone. One afternoon, during tea with Lady Russell, the conversation drifts to health. She lowers her voice, glancing toward the servants. I've ordered one of those new health corsets. Frederick knows nothing of it, of course. He still insists I look my best when hosting, but he needn't know what's beneath the gown. You smile, heart swelling with solidarity. How do you find it? Like breathing again, she replies fervently. I nearly cried the first time I took a proper breath. You both laugh softly, though the laughter carries an edge. To think breathing freely should be a radical luxury. But change always carries risks. At another gathering, Mrs. Henderson, still proud of her daughter Clara's delicate fainting spell, remarks pointedly, some ladies grow careless with fashion. Too loose in their lacing, too plain in their appearance. One mustn't forget, gentlemen notice everything. Her gaze lingers on you a moment too long. You meet her eyes with practiced composure. And yet, Mrs. Henderson, Clara looked much improved the other evening after her stays were loosened. I believe health becomes a lady more than any silhouette. The table goes silent. Mrs. Henderson forces a smile, but her eyes harden. You've crossed a line, however politely. Later your husband warns you. Best not to antagonize her. Henderson's partnership is too valuable to risk over women's gossip. It stings, but you swallow the retort. How easily men dismiss the suffering of women as trivial gossip. Still, the whispers persist and you nurture them. You arrange a tea where pamphlets are slipped beneath saucers. You write cautious letters coated with metaphors about gardening and breathing spaces that only sympathetic readers would understand. You begin to see yourself less as a solitary rebel and more as part of a quiet network spreading through drawing rooms, servants' quarters, and even across cities. Sometimes in the late evening you let yourself dream. You imagine Eleanor attending her first ball in a gown that allows her to dance without fainting. You picture Emma riding a bicycle in a divided skirt, her laughter carrying down the lane, unencumbered by fabric cages. You envision a generation of women who will look back on your struggles and shake their heads in disbelief. Yet reality intrudes. Your mother arrives for a visit, her waist still impossibly tiny despite her age. She surveys you with sharp eyes. You look well enough, though perhaps less refined than before. Are you neglecting your stays? The old fear rises in you, but this time you hold her gaze. I'm choosing health, mother, for myself, and for my daughters. Her lips tighten, disapproval radiating like frost. In my day, women had discipline. You smile gently, not yielding. In your day, perhaps. In mine, we are learning a different kind of discipline, the discipline to say enough. She shakes her head, muttering about modern nonsense. But for the first time, you don't feel crushed by her judgment. You feel free. That night, as Agnes unlaces your health corset, you whisper, "It's happening, isn't it? The change." Agnes smiles, smoothing the fabric. Slowly, then suddenly, "You'll see." Her words echo as you drift towards sleep, the whispers of change surrounding you like a promise. By now, you've endured corsets that squeeze like iron cages, arsenic wafers passed off as beauty aids, and hair tongs hot enough to brand cattle. So when small absurdities happen, you begin to see the comedy in them. Pain and restriction remain, but sometimes the ridiculousness is impossible to ignore. It begins innocently enough. You are attending a tea at Lady Pembroke's, seated among lace-clad women who speak in delicate tones about the season's fashions. Everything is as stiff and proper as usual, until Mrs. Wentworth leans forward and her towering hat, complete with stuffed hummingbirds, suddenly tips forward. The hat pins fail, and the entire creation lands squarely in her teacup. For a moment, the room is silent. Then tea drips from the beak of one unfortunate bird, and you bite your lip to stifle a laugh. Mrs. Wentworth recovers quickly, pretending nothing has happened, but every time you glance at her hatless, damp head, the image of a drowned hummingbird makes your shoulders shake. Agnes later whispers, "At least the poor bird finally touched water in its life," and you nearly choke on laughter. Even corsets, once the instruments of daily torture, begin to reveal their comic side. One morning, Eleanor calls you in distress. "Mother, I sneezed and my corset popped." Sure enough, one of the laces has snapped clean in two, leaving her gown skewed at an odd angle. The governess looks horrified, muttering about indecency. You, however, are nearly doubled over. "Well, my dear, at least it wasn't in church," you manage between chuckles. At dinner parties, fainting spells, though tragic, sometimes carry unintended humor. Lady Russell recounts how a young debutante collapsed at a ball directly into the lobster salad, causing a scandal. "The poor girl nearly drowned in mayonnaise," she whispers to you, and for the first time, you picture fainting not as delicate tragedy, but as slapstick theater. Agnes, ever practical, contributes to the humor in quieter moments. One morning, as she attempts to button your gown with its 57 tiny fastenings, she sighs dramatically. "If men had to dress like this, they'd all go to dinner naked." You laugh so loudly that Emma runs in, demanding to know the joke. Agnes quickly improvises. "I said your mother's buttons are an army and I'm losing the battle." Emma giggles and you laugh again, grateful for levity. The rational dress meetings themselves are not immune to comedy. At one gathering, Lady Harberton demonstrates a divided skirt by attempting a small hop to show freedom of movement. Unfortunately, the skirt proves not quite wide enough, and she stumbles into a potted fern. The room gasps, but then erupts in laughter. "Well," she says cheerfully, brushing soil from her hem, "at least I didn't faint into the lobster." The absurdities extend to cosmetics too. Belladonna drops blur your vision, but one day you accidentally put in an extra drop, leaving you with eyes so wide and unfocused that Emma bursts out laughing. "Mama, you look like a startled owl," she declares. You try to scold her, but the truth is she's right. When you see your reflection, you can't stop laughing either. Humor becomes survival. The pain of corsets, the sting of cosmetics, the absurd expectations of society, they remain, but laughter transforms them. What once felt like prison now occasionally feels like farce. And if you can laugh at a system, perhaps you can begin to dismantle it. One evening, as you and Agnes ready for bed, she leans on the bedpost, sighing. "Do you ever think, ma'am, that someday women will laugh at all this?" You smile, loosening your stays. "I hope they laugh until their sides ache." And in that moment, with bruises on your ribs and tears of laughter in your eyes, you realize something powerful. Laughter itself is rebellion. By now, you've grown used to fashion's absurd demands. You endure the bruises, the faintness, the endless buttoning rituals. But sometimes the clothing itself seems to fight back, as if it resents its role as your cage. It starts with the bustle. That strange metal contraption strapped to your backside like a bird cage has always been awkward, but one summer afternoon, it decides to wage open war. As you attempt to sit gracefully in the garden, the bustle shifts, catches on the chair, and springs outward like a catapult. Your teacup flies into the air, narrowly missing Mrs. Henderson's bonnet. Gasps erupt all around. You're mortified, but later, Agnes shakes with laughter as she replays the moment. "It was like watching a trebuchet at war," she says, wiping tears from her eyes. Even you can't resist a reluctant giggle. Corsets too have their tricks. One particularly humid evening, you feel a seam giving way as you host dinner. With every shallow breath, you pray it will hold. But during dessert, there's a distinct pop, followed by a slow unraveling. You grip the table, smiling serenely as though nothing is wrong, even while your underpinnings betray you one stitch at a time. After the guests leave, Agnes collapses with laughter. "You kept talking about pudding as if your ribs weren't staging a jailbreak," she teases. Even hats have teeth. Fashion demands towering creations laden with flowers, ribbons, and unfortunate birds. One windy afternoon, you stride down Bond Street in your latest Parisian hat, secured with the longest hatpins money can buy. Suddenly, a gust of wind turns your hat into a sail. You cling to it desperately while passers-by scatter to avoid being skewered by airborne pins. Somewhere in the chaos, a gentleman mutters, "Hatpins are more dangerous than bayonets," and you nearly lose your composure entirely. Cosmetics are no kinder. During a dinner at Lady Russell's, you attempt the latest face bleach, which promises porcelain skin. Unfortunately, it reacts badly with the rouge applied afterward. Midway through conversation, you notice horrified stares. Slipping to a mirror, you discover your face has turned a blotchy shade of green. You consider fainting to distract from the scandal, but instead excuse yourself and scrub frantically in the washroom. Later, Lady Russell kindly whispers, "At least you matched the asparagus." Your daughters, too, encounter fashion's vengeance. Eleanor, eager to impress at her first ball, insists on a gown with an extravagant train. Within minutes of dancing, 3 different gentlemen have stepped on it, sending her stumbling like a puppet yanked on strings. When she returns home in tears, you suppress your laughter and comfort her. But later, alone with Agnes, You wheeze with mirth at the memory of her hopping about like a startled rabbit. Better trampled silk than trampled ribs, Agnes remarks. Emma, still young, provides the bluntest commentary. Watching you struggle with 57 buttons on a new dress, she announces, "Mother, it looks like the dress is eating you alive." You and Agnes exchange a glance, then collapse into helpless laughter. Out of the mouths of babes, indeed. Even society seems to recognize fashion's farcical side. Satirical magazines publish cartoons of women fainting into soup bowls or toppling under hats the size of parasols. You and Agnes sometimes sneak a peek, stifling giggles over caricatures of ladies battling their own wardrobes. It feels dangerous to laugh, yet delicious too. Humor punctures the solemnity of fashion's tyranny. Through it all, you begin to realize, ridicule is power. As long as fashion is revered, it enslaves. But when it becomes ridiculous, its grip loosens. Every mishap, every absurdity, every comic disaster is another crack in the armor. One evening, as you peel off another gown with Agnes's help, she muses, "Do you think someday ladies will look back and laugh at us? All these contraptions, all this nonsense." You smile, bruised ribs aching but spirit lightened. "I hope they laugh so loudly they scare the corsets out of the next century." And for the first time you see it clearly, fashion may bite back but laughter bites harder. If corsets and bustles are your daily tormentors, cosmetics are their mischievous cousins, always promising beauty, often delivering disaster. You've learned to approach each little jar and bottle on your vanity with suspicion, for you never quite know whether it will make you glow like porcelain or look like you've wrestled a chimney sweep. Take the infamous belladonna drops. On good days, they give your eyes that wide, luminous look poets rave about. On bad days, well, there was that afternoon tea when you overdid it. You could barely see the teacups in front of you, mistaking the sugar bowl for your saucer and pouring cream directly onto the tablecloth. Lady Henderson, always eager for scandal, raised an eyebrow. You smiled serenely as though everyone kept their sugar on the linen. Rouge carries its own perils. One winter's evening, determined to outshine Mrs. Whitmore's famously flushed cheeks, you applied an extra dab. The result was less delicate bloom and more inflamed beetroot. Agnes tried to blend it, but only succeeded in smearing the color further. At dinner, your husband remarked that you looked unusually hearty. You muttered that the beef was undercooked and prayed no one noticed your resemblance to a boiled lobster. Then there was the face bleach debacle. The instructions claimed it would lighten your complexion to the coveted porcelain shade. Instead, it turned your skin a mottled gray-green. Agnes gasped when she saw you. "You look," she whispered, "like the ghost of Christmas past." You scrubbed furiously, but the stain lingered for hours. At supper, Emma, with brutal honesty only children possess, asked, "Mama, why are you moldy?" You nearly choked on your soup. Powder, meanwhile, has a mind of its own. One windy afternoon, as you prepared for a carriage ride, Agnes puffed a generous cloud over your face. A sudden draft sent it swirling, settling not on your cheeks but all over Agnes herself. She sneezed violently, leaving you both in hysterics. "At least one of us looks fashionable," she said, dusting herself off. Even hair treatments offer comedy. You once attempted a popular tonic guaranteed to produce lustrous curls. It smelled like turpentine and onions. For 3 days, everyone in the household avoided standing too close. "Your hair shines," Agnes assured you diplomatically, though perhaps not in the way intended. The absurdity isn't confined to your own dressing table. At a ball, you witnessed Lady Pembroke attempt to fan herself gracefully. Unfortunately, her rouge had not fully dried, and each flick of her fan left pink smudges across her cheeks until she resembled a painted harlequin. Across the room, Lady Russell whispered, "She's fading before our very eyes." You laughed so hard you nearly lost your breath, though to be fair, the corset may have played a role. Even men aren't immune to fashion's farces. Mr. Henderson once tried a new hair tonic promising virility and shine. Instead, it dyed his scalp a curious shade of purple. At dinner, everyone pretended not to notice, though the footman tripped over the carpet in an effort to suppress his laughter. Later, Agnes whispered, "At least now his head matches his temper." The comedy of cosmetics lies not just in the disasters, but in the sheer seriousness with which society treats them. Women risk blindness, poisoning, and burns, all to look as though they've never lifted a finger. And when something goes wrong, everyone pretends it hasn't. At least until you're home with Agnes, laughing until tears run down your face, One night, while removing another experimental cream that stung like nettles, you sigh, "Why must beauty hurt so much?" Agnes, dabbing at your skin, grins. "Because if it didn't, half the companies in Bond Street would go out of business." It's absurd, it's dangerous, and yet, there's comedy in the madness. Laughter makes the sting more bearable. And sometimes, it feels like the very act of laughing is your truest rebellion. If corsets compress and cosmetics betray, then petticoats conspire. Those endless layers of fabric are the silent villains of Victorian fashion, weighing you down, tripping your steps, and occasionally turning you into an accidental slapstick performer. It begins innocently each morning. Agnes piles layer after layer onto your waist. Cotton, flannel, starched muslin, perhaps even horsehair for extra stiffness. By the third layer, you already feel as though you're wearing a tent. By the fifth, you wonder if you should apply for planning permission to occupy this much space. The real trouble, however, comes when you try to walk. Your skirts swish and rustle like sails in a storm, catching on chair legs, door frames, and unsuspecting pets. More than once, poor Emma's kitten has vanished beneath your skirts, only to reappear looking bewildered after being dragged halfway across the drawing room. "Mama, the cat thinks your dress is a cave." Emma squeals, while Agnes mutters darkly about lint rollers. Stairs are another battlefield. To ascend gracefully, you must lift your skirts just enough to avoid tripping, but not so high that scandalized relatives faint at the sight of your ankles. This balancing act rarely succeeds. Once, hurrying to greet your mother-in-law, you caught 3 layers under your heel and nearly tumbled backward. Only a desperate clutch at the banister saved you. "Such poise," your mother-in-law remarked coldly, entirely missing the near-death acrobatics. Petticoats also seem to possess a sense of humor at the worst possible moments. At a dinner party, you sat too close to the fire, and the starch in your skirts began to crinkle ominously. Agnes, ever vigilant, swooped in with a poker to shove the grate closed before you roasted like a Christmas goose. Later, she whispered, "Ma'am, your petticoats nearly flambéed." You laughed until your ribs ached, though that may have been the corset's fault. Travel brings its own disasters. Boarding a carriage requires precision. Step up, lift skirts, duck hat, mind bustle. On one memorable outing you misjudged. Half your petticoats entered the carriage while the other half remained stubbornly outside, flapping like sails in the wind. The footman struggled to stuff them in after you, red-faced and wheezing, as passers-by stopped to watch the spectacle. Somewhere in the crowd, a boy shouted, "It's a lady with her own tent." You wish the ground would swallow you whole. Then there's the matter of weather. Rain turns petticoats into sodden sponges that cling heavily to your legs. Snow adds an extra 10 pounds of ice to your hem. Mud paints the edges a lovely shade of brown no laundress can fully remove. Once, after trudging through a muddy lane, you returned home only to discover half the garden path had hitched a ride on your skirts. Agnes shook her head. "We should plant flowers directly on your hem next season." Even indoors, petticoats plot rebellion. They rustle so loudly that sneaking anywhere is impossible. When you tried to surprise Eleanor with a birthday gift, she heard your approach 5 rooms away. "Mother, I could hear you swishing like a thunderstorm," she laughed. "Despite the nuisance society insists on them. A lady without her full complement of petticoats is whispered about as careless, even indecent. Once at church, a young woman dared wear only 2 layers. The whispers buzzed through the pews like angry bees. She might as well be naked, one matron hissed. You tried to keep a straight face, picturing the girl in her modest gown scandalizing the congregation with her ankles fully covered. At rational dress meetings, petticoats are a frequent topic of ridicule. Constance Wilde once declared, "I've lost more servants to laundry accidents than childbirth," prompting raucous laughter. Lady Harberton suggested replacing them with light wool bloomers. The room gasped, then giggled nervously at the thought of bloomers flapping under skirts. Revolutionary, yes, but comic too. Agnes, of course, has her own perspective. Wrestling with piles of fabric each morning, she mutters, "If these skirts get any wider, ma'am, we'll need to move into a bigger house." You laugh, but secretly you suspect she's right. Yet even in their absurdity, petticoats carry symbolism. Each layer is another barrier, another restriction, another piece of the armor women wear to perform their role. Heavy, impractical, ridiculous, and somehow expected. But when you and Agnes laugh until tears run down your cheeks at the sight of the kitten clinging to your hem like a sailor in a storm, You know that ridicule is the first step toward change. Because if you can laugh at petticoats, perhaps you can begin to imagine life without them. If petticoats are heavy nuisances, the bustle is their mischievous cousin, a contraption that turns every chair, doorway, and carriage into a battlefield. It's a device meant to give you the fashionable posterior shelf, but in practice, it behaves like a prankster strapped to your backside. Your first true bustle disaster occurs at a garden party. You attempt to sit on a delicate wrought iron chair, lowering yourself with practiced grace. But the bustle has other plans. Its metal frame catches on the chair's edge, springing upward like a trap. The next thing you know, you're half-seated, half-suspended, legs flailing, skirts ballooning around you. Guests gasp in horror, until the chair tips backward, sending you gently into a hedge. Your dignity suffers, but later, in the safety of your bedroom, you and Agnes laugh until you wheeze. "Ma'am," she chokes out, "you looked like a turtle on its back." Another time, while walking through Bond Street, your bustle hooks onto a passing gentleman's umbrella. Neither of you notice until you feel a sharp tug. You glance back to find the poor man trailing behind you, his umbrella caught in your skirts like a flag of surrender. He bows furiously, apologizing, though everyone on the street is already howling with laughter. Agnes whispers, "At least it wasn't a lamppost this time." Even in your own home, the bustle proves treacherous. Navigating narrow doorways requires a sideways shuffle. Forget once and you're wedged firmly like a cork in a bottle. On one memorable occasion, Emma discovers you stuck halfway into the parlor. "Mama, the door ate you," she cries, tugging helpfully at your sleeve. It takes both Agnes and a footman to pull you free, leaving you red-faced but oddly amused. Dinner parties present their own bustle tragedies. At the Hendersons, you attempt to perch elegantly on a small gilt chair. The bustle tips you forward, nearly sending your face into the soup tureen. Later, Mrs. Henderson remarks smugly, "Some ladies simply aren't built for fashion." You resist the urge to reply, "Nor are chairs." Even more humiliating are the times the bustle squeaks. Yes, squeaks. The metal frame, under the pressure of your movements, emits a sound so suspiciously like flatulence that you want to vanish beneath the floorboards. At a concert, during a solemn violin solo, your bustle betrays you with a long, mournful squeal. Heads turn. You cough loudly, fanning yourself, praying no one connects the noise to your backside. Agnes later consoles you, "At least it was in key." Your daughters, of course, find bustle humor irresistible. Eleanor tries one on in secret and promptly topples over, skirts in the air, shrieking with laughter. Emma, ever observant, declares, "It looks like you've strapped a cushion to your bottom." She isn't wrong. The Rational Dress Society devotes entire meetings to mocking bustles. Constance Wilde recounts falling into a carriage and being unable to rise because her bustle wedged her in place. Lady Harberton jokes that bustles are the only cages women volunteer to sit on. Laughter fills the room, the kind that feels dangerous, like shaking the foundations of society itself. Yet the bustle is more than slapstick. It's a symbol of absurdity taken to its logical extreme. A metal frame worn for the sole purpose of exaggerating a body part men find attractive, even if it makes sitting nearly impossible. It reveals, in its clanging comedy, the utter foolishness of fashion's priorities. One evening, removing the contraption with Agnes's help, you groan, "This device has ruined more of my dignity than gossip ever could." She smirks. "At least gossip doesn't squeak when you walk." You collapse into laughter, the kind that leaves you breathless but also oddly liberated. Because the more you laugh at fashion's follies, the less power they hold. And perhaps that's the true secret. Change doesn't just come from pamphlets and protests. It also comes from laughter. Enough laughter to topple even the most ridiculous contraption strapped to a woman's backside. If corsets squeeze and bustles ambush, hats complete the circus. By the late Victorian era, a fashionable lady's hat is less a garment and more a small ecosystem, complete with flowers, ribbons, feathers, and in many cases, entire stuffed birds. To keep these towering creations perched on your head, society arms you with the deadliest accessory of all, the hatpin. You discover the comedy of hatpins at a crowded omnibus. Wedged among strangers, you tilt your head politely only to feel resistance. Turning slightly, you realize with horror that your hatpin has skewered the sleeve of a gentleman beside you. Each time you shift, he jerks with you, tethered like a marionette. Finally, you stammer an apology while Agnes, red with suppressed laughter, frees the poor man. He bows stiffly, muttering, An honor, madam, though his eyes say otherwise. Another time at church you bow your head in prayer. When you rise, your hat refuses to come with you. It has impaled itself into the pew cushion. You tug discreetly, but the hat won't budge. At last, a helpful verger steps forward to pry it loose. The congregation pretends not to notice, but the stifled snorts echo louder than the hymns. Hats also have a flair for the dramatic outdoors. One windy afternoon, your new Parisian masterpiece, complete with trailing ribbons and a stuffed hummingbird, nearly takes flight. You clutch desperately as gusts yank your head backward like reins on a horse. A passerby mutters, "Looks like the lady's about to be carried to France," and you nearly dissolve into laughter. Emma finds the entire concept of hatpins hilarious. Watching Agnes secure your latest creation with pins so long they could double as swords, she declares, "Mama, you look like a porcupine." Agnes nearly drops the hat from laughing. Later, Eleanor chimes in with teenage seriousness, "If I ever faint, Mother, please don't let them revive me with hatpins. I'd rather stay unconscious." Of course, hatpin accidents aren't confined to the home. At a dinner, Mrs. Whitmore turns too quickly and jabs her husband squarely in the ear. His yelp echoes through the drawing room. Everyone pretends it didn't happen, though Lady Russell leans over to whisper, "Perhaps she meant it." You choke on your wine, hiding laughter behind a handkerchief. Rational Dress Society meetings relish hatpin stories. Lady Harberton recounts being denied entry to a theater because her pins were deemed a public hazard. Constance Wilde jokes that hatpins are the only weapon women are allowed to carry without scandal. Someone suggests organizing fencing lessons with them, and the room erupts in giggles. Yet the humor conceals darker truths. Newspapers occasionally report genuine injuries. Men accidentally stabbed on crowded trains, children poked in the eye. Some cities even pass ordinances requiring protective tips. Still, fashion resists. A lady must defend her dignity, one matron insists, brandishing a hatpin like a duelist. You wonder privately how many men have survived fashionable skewerings in silence. One evening, after wrestling free a particularly obstinate hat, you groan to Agnes, "Why must fashion always require weapons?" She grins, slipping the pin into its velvet case. "At least this one doesn't squeak like the bustle." You laugh so hard your ribs ache, and for once the pain isn't from corsetry. Because really, how could anyone take a fashion seriously when it arms women with foot-long skewers disguised as accessories? And that's the beauty of it. The more ridiculous the hatpins, the more obvious the truth. Fashion has gone mad. And when madness becomes funny, it begins to lose its power. Victorian dinners are supposed to be elegant affairs, full of candlelight, conversation, and delicate courses. In reality, they're obstacle courses, where corsets crush your stomach, bustles unseat you, and etiquette rules transform every mouthful into a potential fiasco. The trouble begins with sitting. After the ordeal of lowering yourself into a chair with a bustle the size of a small ottoman, you must then perch upright without leaning back. Lean too far forward and your hat attacks the guest opposite. Lean too far back, and the bustle squeaks, announcing your every move like a badly oiled hinge. Once, at the Hendersons' table, your bustle gave a prolonged squeal just as the host proposed a toast. The sound so perfectly mimicked a deflating balloon that you nearly dissolved into laughter. "A spirited contribution, Mrs. Henderson," one gentleman quipped, and you very nearly choked on your soup. Then comes the food, or rather, the impossibility of eating it. A corset laced to 19 inches leaves space for perhaps 3 bites of fish and half a potato. Anything more and you risk fainting face first into the pudding. At one dinner, determined not to seem delicate, you boldly attempted roast beef. Midway through, the corset rebelled. You pressed a hand to your waist, praying no one noticed the rising panic in your eyes. Agnes, serving discreetly at your side, whispered, "Breathe shallow, ma'am, or I'll be fetching smelling salts." Table manners only make matters worse. Knives and forks must be wielded with delicate precision, no matter how slippery the dish. Once, while wrestling with an especially gelatinous calf's foot jelly, your fork launched a quivering piece across the table. It landed squarely on Mr. Whitmore's lap. The silence was thunderous until he coughed politely and said, "Ah, my favorite." Conversation resumed, but you spent the rest of the evening staring fixedly at your plate, cheeks flaming. Children, of course, provide their own comic relief. At a family dinner, Emma, still gloriously uncorseted, stared at the array of spoons, forks, and knives with wide eyes. "Mama, why do we need so many weapons just to eat?" she whispered loudly enough for 3 tables to hear. Eleanor, mortified, tried to hush her, but the damage was done. Lady Russell snorted into her wine. Even your husband struggled to hide a smile. Dessert is another danger. Those elaborate molded puddings wobble precariously, daring you to serve them without incident. Once, while helping yourself to blancmange, you underestimated the spoon's grip. The entire wobbling tower slid onto your plate, overflowing onto the tablecloth. Mrs. Henderson arched an eyebrow. "A generous portion, my dear." You muttered something about accidents of gravity and wished the ground would swallow you whole. And then there are the accidental noises. Not from you, heaven forbid, but from the clothing itself. Stiff skirts brushing against chairs sound like crumpling paper. Petticoats sigh and rustle ominously. Bustles creak. At one formal dinner, a guest's steel crinoline snapped audibly mid-course, sending a loud ping through the room. The poor woman froze as if shot, while her skirts collapsed lopsidedly. Everyone pretended nothing had happened, though forks trembled with suppressed laughter. Rational Dress Society meetings relish such stories. Constance Wilde once confessed she deliberately ordered soup at every dinner, since it was the only dish she could consume without fainting. Lady Harberton recounted leaning too close to a candle and setting her lace cuff alight. "Nothing clears a table faster than spontaneous combustion," she quipped, and the group roared. At home afterward, you and Agnes replay each disaster with glee. "Did you see Mrs. Whitmore's face when the blancmange slid?" Agnes laughs. "I thought her eyebrows might climb right off her forehead." Laughter is a balm after the mortification, transforming humiliation into a shared comedy act between mistress and maid. Yet behind the laughter lies a truth. Dinners are less about food than performance. Women are expected to appear effortless while starving in corsets, maneuvering mountains of fabric and wielding cutlery like weapons of war. It's absurd, it's exhausting, and sometimes it's hilarious. One night, loosening your stays after another dinner ordeal, you sigh, "Why do we suffer so?" Agnes chuckles. "Because otherwise the gentlemen might notice the food more than the ladies. Can't have that, can we?" You burst out laughing because in the end, perhaps dining disasters aren't just comic, they're rebellion in disguise. Proof that no matter how rigid the rules, life finds a way to wobble, spill, squeak, and laugh its way through the cracks. If ladies suffer from fashion, servants witness it all, and their commentary, though whispered, is often sharper than any hatpin. Behind the scenes, in kitchens and sculleries, the absurdities of upper-class attire become the stuff of daily comedy. Agnes, of course, leads the chorus. She has laced your corsets, pinned your hats, and rescued you from petticoat avalanches. But she is not above gentle mockery. "Ma'am," she once declared, tugging with both arms at your laces, "if they cinch these any tighter, we'll need a blacksmith instead of a maid." You laughed, though breathlessly, clutching the bedpost as though bracing for a storm. In truth, the servants' hall often rings with tales of fashion disasters. The housemaid Mary once confessed that while dusting a guest bedroom, she found a bustle frame hanging on the chair. "Looked like a bird cage for a goose," she said, eyes wide. "I near expected something to squawk inside it." The kitchen staff roared with laughter, pounding the table with spoons. Even the butler, Mr. Grayson, usually solemn as a gravestone, has been known to smirk. One evening, after watching you maneuver your skirts through the narrow dining room door, he murmured, "Like fitting a battleship through a canal." You pretended not to hear, but later, in the safety of your chamber, repeated the line to Agnes, and both of you collapsed in laughter. Servants also notice how fashion creates endless extra work. Starched petticoats require boiling, ironing, and restarching. Bustles bend and break, demanding mending. Cosmetics stain linens beyond redemption. "If beauty is pain for the lady," Cook once remarked, scrubbing rouge from a napkin, "it's blisters for the laundry maid." Their satire grows sharper during crises. When young Clara Henderson fainted at your dinner party, the maids muttered afterward, "Fainted, did she? No wonder, squeezed like a sausage in a skin." Another added, "And they call us working girls. At least we can breathe while scrubbing." Their laughter echoed down the servants' staircase long after the guests had departed. Agnes in particular has perfected the art of dry commentary. When your bustle squeaked loudly during a ball, she whispered, "At least it's in tune with the orchestra." When your hatpin stabbed the pew, she murmured, "Perhaps the pew deserved it." Her wit makes disasters bearable, turning humiliation into shared hilarity. But their satire isn't mere mockery, it's truth spoken sideways. Servants see clearly what society pretends not to, that fashion cripples women, wastes time, and endangers health. They laugh because the alternative is despair. Once, listening to the kitchen staff imitate fashionable ladies, you nearly fell off your chair. Mary puffed out her chest, pinched her waist, and minced about, declaring, "Oh heavens, my corset's too loose. Only 17 inches today." The others shrieked with laughter, mimicking fainting spells and exaggerated hat tilts. For a moment, you wondered whether your own family servants did the same behind your back. The thought both mortified and amused you. The Rational Dress Society might write pamphlets and give speeches, but the servants deliver their revolution through satire. They mock, they laugh, and in doing so they puncture the absurd bubble of fashion seriousness. Even Emma has joined their chorus. After watching Agnes wrestle with your skirts one morning, she asked innocently, "Why don't you just wear what Agnes wears? She can walk, bend, and even breathe." Agnes snorted so hard she nearly dropped a petticoat. One evening, after a long day of entertaining, you asked Agnes whether servants ever wished to trade places with their mistresses. She considered it for a moment, then said, "Only if the gowns come without the corsets, ma'am." You laughed until tears rolled down your cheeks, realizing that perhaps the servants have always been the true rational dress advocates, long before the society gave it a name. Because their satire, their sly jokes, their laughter in the scullery, it isn't just mockery, it's survival. And sometimes it's the sharpest truth of all. If fashion at home is troublesome, fashion on the road is downright hazardous. Trains, carriages, and even seaside holidays conspire with corsets, bustles, and hats to turn every journey into a comedy of errors. Take the train to Brighton. Boarding alone is trial enough. Skirts swish, petticoats puff, bustle squeaks, and your hat scrapes the carriage door frame. Once inside, the true battle begins, fitting into the narrow seats. You perch carefully, bustle pressing forward like an unwelcome guest. Agnes squeezes beside you, muttering, "We'll need to buy a second ticket just for your skirts." The guard, unsympathetic, merely slams the door and wishes you a pleasant journey. But the real chaos arrives with movement. At every jolt of the train, passengers lurch. Your hatpin catches in the upholstery, holding your head at a painful angle until Agnes discreetly frees it. Across the aisle, a gentleman sneezes, sending your veil fluttering into his teacup. He hands it back dripping, mumbling apologies while you consider leaping from the carriage at the next stop. Carriages offer no relief. Once, traveling to a dinner party, your bustle wedged firmly in the door. 2 footmen pushed, Agnes pulled, and you, half-strangled by corset and lace, shouted encouragement like a general in battle. At last, with a pop, you tumbled inside, skirts in disarray. Arriving late, you claimed traffic, though everyone knew the true culprit sat firmly under your gown. Weather adds its own comedy. On a blustery day in Bath, your feathered hat became a sail. The wind caught it, nearly dragging you into the Roman baths. Agnes clutched your waist to anchor you, while passers-by applauded as though it were a performance. "Next time," she panted afterward, "we'll tie you down with ropes." Steamships bring further indignities. On a channel crossing, you discovered that seasickness and corsets are mortal enemies. Each wave brought fresh misery as your compressed stomach rebelled. By the time you staggered ashore in Calais, pale and breathless, Agnes remarked dryly, "At least you matched the French ladies. Green is very fashionable here. Even simple strolls present hazards." In Hyde Park, your skirts once caught on a gentleman's walking stick. He, unaware, continued striding, dragging you several steps before realizing he had acquired an unwilling companion. You both stammered apologies, but the sight of you tethered like a reluctant balloon sent nearby children into fits of laughter. The Rational Dress Society delights in travel tales. Constance Wilde recounts bicycling in divided skirts, startling pedestrians who thought a centaur galloped past. Lady Harberton describes a trip to Paris where customs officers, searching her trunk, mistook her bloomers for men's trousers and nearly confiscated them. "Contraband legs," she declared, and the room erupted in laughter. Even at home, travel complaints echo through the servants' hall. Mary, sent to pack your gowns, once grumbled, "We need a trunk just for her sleeves." Cook added, "And another for her hats." The butler shook his head. "If fashion gets any bigger, we'll have to hire a second carriage." Yet amid the chaos, humor softens the ordeal. Returning from a rain-soaked journey, skirts dripping, hat askew, you asked Agnes, "Do I look presentable?" She considered gravely, then replied, "If the look you're after is drowned peacock, ma'am, then perfect." You collapsed into laughter, water streaming from your feathers. Because in truth, travel exposes fashion's absurdity most clearly. On the road, away from carefully staged drawing rooms, impractical clothing reveals its foolishness. Corsets restrict breathing in mountain air. Petticoats soak up mud like sponges. Bustles wedge in carriage doors. Hats try to take flight. And yet, through the laughter, you glimpse something hopeful. Each journey is a reminder that freedom, of movement, of dress, of spirit, is possible. Perhaps one day travel will mean joy, not entrapment. Until then, at least you have Agnes's sharp tongue and your own ability to laugh at the madness. If adults preserve fashion's illusions with polite silence, children shatter them with innocent honesty. No one exposes the absurdity of corsets, bustles, and hatpins quite like a child with no regard for etiquette. Emma is your chief critic. At 7, she has no filter. The first time she saw you in your new health corset, she clapped her hands in delight. "Mama, you can bend again," she exclaimed, watching you retrieve a dropped handkerchief. Later, seeing you in your old stays, she frowned deeply. "You look like you swallowed a broomstick." Agnes nearly dropped the brush she was holding, stifling laughter behind her hand. Eleanor, at 14, is less blunt but no less observant. Watching you maneuver through the parlor in full skirts, she muttered, "It's like steering a ship through a storm." You raised an eyebrow, only for her to add, "At least you don't squeak as much as Mrs. Henderson." Even your husband, overhearing, coughed into his newspaper to hide a chuckle. Children outside your household are equally merciless. At a neighborhood gathering, little Clara's cousin tugged on his mother's sleeve and whispered, loudly enough for everyone, "Why does Aunt Clara walk like a penguin?" Poor Clara blushed crimson, her corset clearly responsible for the waddling gait. No adult dared laugh, but the children erupted into giggles. Church services offer their own comedy. During one sermon, Emma pointed at a matron's towering hat bristling with stuffed birds and announced, "Mama, that lady has a whole zoo on her head." The pew behind you shook with muffled laughter. The matron, oblivious, nodded piously as though the sparrows atop her hat were part of divine design. Meals become playgrounds for childish observations. Eleanor, staring at the array of spoons at a formal dinner, asked, "Do we need all these weapons to eat pudding?" Her father frowned, but several guests nearly choked on their wine. Emma once poked your bustle experimentally during dessert and declared, "Mama, your dress has a cushion on the back. Can I sit there?" You were mortified, but the servants in the corner nearly collapsed with suppressed laughter. Children also noticed the contradictions adults ignore. When you explained corsets as fashion, Emma frowned. "But if fashion makes you sick, why not change it?" Her simple logic silenced you more effectively than any essay. Later, at a Rational Dress Society meeting, you repeated her words. The room erupted in applause. Sometimes, the most powerful arguments arrive from the mouths of babes. Even visiting children joined the chorus. At Lady Russell's home, her grandson stared at your elaborate gown before announcing, "You look like a birthday cake." His mother gasped in horror, but you only laughed, admitting the truth. With your frosted lace and towering hat, you did resemble a confection. The humor isn't always intentional. Eleanor, trying her first training corset, sighed dramatically and declared, "If this is womanhood, I'd rather stay 12. Emma promptly replied, "You don't look 12, you look like a squashed orange." The sisters dissolved into laughter, rolling on the carpet while Agnes muttered about improper behavior. Children's commentary often becomes servants' entertainment. Mary once repeated Emma's line about your broomstick waist to the scullery maids, who cackled for an entire evening. "Out of the mouths of babes," Agnes said, shaking her head, though her grin betrayed amusement. The truth is, children are free from fashion's chains, both literal and metaphorical. Their blunt honesty reveals what adults dare not admit. Corsets are cages, bustles are ridiculous, and hats are traveling menageries. Their laughter punctures the grand illusion of elegance. One evening, as you removed your corset, Emma curled on your lap and whispered, I like you better like this, soft and huggable. Tears pricked your eyes, for in her words lay both comedy and truth. Perhaps her generation will grow up wiser, unwilling to trade comfort for cages. Until then, children will continue their commentary, unfiltered and devastatingly accurate, reminding everyone that sometimes the greatest revolution begins with laughter and honesty too simple to ignore. Every grand Victorian ball is meant to display elegance, wealth, and flawless manners. But beneath the chandeliers and string quartets, chaos always lurks, ready to trip a train, topple a tiara, or expose the ridiculous fragility of fashion. The evening begins with high hopes. You're in your best silk gown, wearing the health corset beneath. Agnes has managed your hair into an elaborate swirl that miraculously doesn't smell of singed hair. Your husband beams, already imagining the business connections he'll secure tonight. Just smile and glide, my dear, he instructs as though you're a show pony. The grand staircase is your first trial. Dozens of women descend like royalty, gowns trailing, bustles bobbing. You take a careful step, and promptly catch your hem under your heel. A muffled rip echoes like cannon fire. Head swivel. Heart racing, you freeze, but Agnes, who has wisely stationed herself nearby, swoops in like a general on the battlefield, crouching to free your skirt before disaster escalates. All under control, she mutters, smoothing fabric as though nothing happened. On the dance floor, further comedy ensues. A gentleman bows deeply, but his waistcoat buttons pop like musket shots, one striking another guest's champagne glass. The lady shrieks, not from injury but from a ruined gown. You can't help laughing, which earns you a scandalized glare from Mrs. Henderson. Apparently, humor is not part of the evening's decorum. Then comes the quadrille, a dance designed to showcase both grace and coordination. Unfortunately, coordination is in short supply. One matron forgets the steps entirely, colliding with her partner. Another, attempting a curtsy, topples backward thanks to an overzealous bustle. The entire set dissolves into chaos, half the dancers entangled like draped curtains. Watching from the sidelines, you bite your lip to suppress laughter while Emma whispers, "It looks like a puppet show gone wrong." Dinner provides no relief. The fashionable table centerpiece, a towering arrangement of ostrich feathers, catches fire when placed too close to a candelabra. Panic ripples down the table. Footmen rush with pitchers of water, dousing not only the flames but half the guests in a rain of soggy feathers. Mrs. Henderson sputters, soaked and livid, while her daughter Clara tries to stifle giggles. "At least it's cooler now," Clara whispers to you, and you nearly choke on your soup. The piece de resistance of disaster arrives when Lady Pembroke unveils her latest Parisian gown. The bodice is so tightly laced that midway through a waltz she faints, right into the orchestra pit. Violins screech, cellos crash, and one unfortunate trombonist ends up pinned beneath layers of satin. The music halts in chaos while gentlemen scramble to extract her. "Quite the dramatic exit," Eleanor mutters beside you, deadpan as only a teenager can be. Instead of dampening spirits, these mishaps loosen them. Laughter bubbles through the room, breaking the rigid veneer of propriety. People gossip, joke, and even admit aloud that corsets and bustles are impractical. "If only Paris designed clothing for survival," one man quips, drawing chuckles from both sexes. Even your husband, normally humorless about social appearances, allows himself a grin. By evening's end, the ball has achieved what no pamphlet or lecture could. It exposed the absurdities of fashion through farce. The grand illusion of effortless elegance crumbled into a comedy of errors. As you climb into your carriage, weary but amused, Agnes leans close. "Well, ma'am, if anyone still believes fashion makes us graceful, tonight proved otherwise." You nod, laughter shaking your corseted ribs. Perhaps the Rational Dress Society should simply host a ball. The clothes would do the persuading for us. For all their opinions about what women should wear, Victorian men are rarely subjected to the same discomforts. That fact becomes glaringly obvious one Saturday morning when Henry, your husband, complains about his stiff collar. "This starched linen is suffocating," he groans, tugging at his cravat like a condemned man with a noose. You stare at him in disbelief. "Suffocating? You've been living with compressed ribs, shallow breaths, and fainting spells since adolescence. But apparently, a collar brushing his throat is worthy of outrage." "You poor thing," you reply sweetly. "Shall I fetch the smelling salts?" Henry blinks, not catching your sarcasm. "Don't be ridiculous. but truly it's dreadful. He loosens the cravat entirely and sighs in relief. You consider pointing out that no woman can simply loosen her corset midway through the day, but bite your tongue. Later, in the drawing room, Henry pontificates about women's fashions to a visiting friend. "My wife looks best in blue silk," he declares, as though you're a racehorse and he's discussing your tack. "The tighter the waist, the more refined the silhouette." His friend nods gravely, sipping sherry. Neither man wears anything more restrictive than a tailored coat. Their greatest discomfort is warm wool on a summer day. Agnes, dusting nearby, mutters under her breath, "Easy for them to say, sir. They never had a rib poking their lungs." You nearly choke on your tea. The hypocrisy reaches comic heights at church the following Sunday. The sermon, ironically about humility, is interrupted by a loud ripping sound. One gentleman's trousers split at the seam as he bent to kneel, exposing bright red undergarments. The congregation gasps, then dissolves into muffled laughter. You exchange amused glances with Eleanor and Emma. Imagine the scandal if a woman had suffered a similar wardrobe malfunction. She'd be shunned for life. Yet this poor man will be teased for a week and then forgiven. Henry, meanwhile, spends the carriage ride home railing about improper tailoring. You refrain from pointing out that women's corsets are deliberately designed to injure, yet no sermon has ever been derailed by the sound of one splitting. At dinner, the hypocrisy resurfaces yet again. Henry complains about the expense of your new walking boots, muttering that women are far too extravagant. But the next day he proudly shows off his new watch fob, a decorative chain that costs 3 times as much as your boots. "An investment," he insists. You raise an eyebrow. Of course, because nothing appreciates in value like a shiny chain dangling from your waistcoat. He glares, suspecting mockery but can't quite prove it. Eleanor notices the absurdity too. Why do men insist on women having tiny waists when they themselves have bellies like overripe melons? She whispers one evening after dinner, gesturing at Mr. Henderson across the room. You nearly spit out your port. "Hush, child," you scold gently, though you can't disagree. Mr. Henderson's waist is easily double yours, and yet he had the audacity to once call your corset a bit loose. The crowning moment of absurdity arrives at a summer garden party. The men, in their sensible suits, play a vigorous game of croquet. The women, corseted and layered in silk, are expected to watch decorously, clapping politely when a ball strikes a wicket. One lady faints from heat and compression, collapsing onto the lawn. The men rush to assist, tooting about women's fragility. Not one acknowledges that the men are dressed for comfort while the women are dressed for display. Back in your carriage, you can't help laughing. "They truly believe we're delicate flowers," you tell Agnes later, all while they sip brandy and loosen their collars. Agnes smirks. "Flowers, ma'am? More like weeds. We bend, but we don't break." If only the men realized how much stronger you'd all be without those contraptions. The hypocrisy is absurd, yes, infuriating at times, but also, when observed with the right eye, unintentionally hilarious. A parade of men complaining about collars, praising impossibly small waists, and calling women fragile while sweating freely in loose suits. If laughter truly is medicine, then husbands provide an endless supply. For all the discomfort endured upstairs, it's the servants downstairs who see the comedy most clearly. After all, they're the ones who lace the corsets, carry the skirts, and clean up the fainted bodies. And when no mistress is listening, they laugh. One afternoon, you accidentally overhear Agnes and Cook in the scullery. They're doubled over with suppressed giggles. "Did you see Lady Pembroke last night?" Agnes wheezes. Bent so stiff she looked like a poker stuck upright in the drawing room. Cook nearly chokes on her tea. And when she tried to sit, "Oh mercy, I thought the chair would protest." You ought to be offended, but instead you smile. There's truth in the laughter. Servants witness the absurdities of fashion more intimately than anyone. They're the ones pulling on laces until knuckles bleed, fishing lost hatpins from upholstery, and reviving fainted ladies with vinegar-soaked cloths. To them, society's finest appear less like angels of the house and more like overdressed puppets teetering on strings. Agnes, of course, keeps her humor carefully hidden when she dresses you. But occasionally her wit slips out. "Hold your breath, ma'am," she instructs one morning, tugging at the corset. "Not that you'll be able to breathe afterward anyway." The remark is so dry you nearly laugh out loud, which would ruin the careful lacing. In the laundry room, the girls joke about skirts so wide they can't fit through doorways. One maid swears she saw her mistress knock over an entire tea service simply by turning too quickly. Another claims her lady's bustle once caught fire when standing too near the hearth. "Put her out with the coal scuttle we did," she brags. The story may be exaggerated, but the laughter is real. Even footmen aren't immune to ridicule. They're tasked with carrying parasols, shawls, and endless hat boxes. "Her ladyship needs half the British Navy just to transport her accessories," one grumbles, before imitating a swan-like curtsy so exaggerated that the others collapse in hysterics. At first, you worry these jests betray disrespect. But the more you listen, the more you recognize a hidden resilience. Humor is the servants' rebellion, their quiet way of puncturing the pomp. They cannot challenge society's rules, but they can laugh at them. And in laughter lies freedom. Agnes once confides her secret trick for surviving long evenings of lacing. "I imagine all the ladies as sausage links," she whispers conspiratorially, "stuffed so tight that one prick of a fork would make them pop." The mental image is so absurd you struggle to keep a straight face at dinner. Looking around the table, you suddenly see not elegant silhouettes but rows of trussed sausages dressed in silk. The giggle nearly escapes you mid-soup. The greatest moment of servant satire comes during a spring cleaning day. The maids, tasked with airing out gowns, decide to try them on. You stumble upon them in the ballroom, maids swanning about in bustles 3 sizes too large, curtsying with mock solemnity. Cook plays the gentleman, bowing deeply while holding a broom like a cane. They freeze when they see you, expecting fury. But instead you laugh so hard tears stream down your cheeks. "Don't stop on my account," you manage, waving them on. Relieved, the maids resume their parody. One faints dramatically onto a chaise, another shrieks about an imaginary hatpin accident, while Cook proclaims, "Oh, the agony of beauty! Pass me another sausage casing." It's ridiculous, liberating, and oddly profound. Their mockery exposes truths society won't admit: that fashion is absurd, that beauty rituals are torture, that women suffer needlessly for appearances. You realize the servants' rebellion is more than humor, it's social commentary wrapped in laughter. Later, as Agnes helps you undress, you thank her. "For what, ma'am?" she asks innocently. "For reminding me not to take all this too seriously." Agnes smiles, tugging gently at the loosened laces. "Someone has to, ma'am. Otherwise we'd all go mad." And so the servants' rebellion continues quietly below stairs, a chorus of laughter echoing against the clatter of pots and pans. While society parades its rigid ideals above, the people who lace, button, scrub, and polish find freedom in satire. In their jokes lies a truth too dangerous to speak aloud but too important to ignore: that the emperor, or in this case the empress in blue silk, has no clothes worth suffering for. Fashion, like family, is always a battlefield. And in your household, the war lines are drawn not with swords but with corsets, skirts, and common sense. It begins when Eleanor, now a confident young woman, declares at breakfast, "I refuse to wear that training corset another day. It feels like being stuffed into a sausage." The statement shocks your mother, who happens to be visiting. She nearly drops her teacup. "Nonsense, child. Corsetry is discipline. Without it, you'll slouch like a washerwoman." Eleanor, never one to retreat, shoots back, "I'd rather slouch and breathe than stand like a poker and faint." Emma, younger but equally bold, claps her hands in support. "Hear, hear. Let's burn the corsets in the garden." Your mother gasps as though Emma has just suggested setting Parliament on fire. Such vulgar talk. Margaret, do control your daughters. You, caught between generations, sip your tea very carefully. On one side, your mother embodies the rigid Victorian ideal, corseted since girlhood, unwavering in belief that beauty requires pain. On the other, your daughters, who've grown up watching you sneak rebellions, are openly mocking the system. At church that Sunday, the clash intensifies. Eleanor wears her looser health corset, standing tall but breathing easily. Your mother whispers sharply in the pew. She looks disgraceful, practically barrel-chested. Emma leans over and whispers louder, "At least she won't faint into the hymn book." Several parishioners snicker, and you quickly fan yourself to hide a smile. The dinner table becomes another stage for generational skirmishes. Your mother launches into one of her lectures. "In my day, a girl's virtue was measured by the tightness of her lacing." Eleanor retorts, In my day, girls would rather measure by how far we can ride a bicycle. Emma adds mischievously, or by how many hatpins we can poke into society's nonsense. Even Henry, usually oblivious, nearly chokes on his roast beef at that remark. One evening, the argument spills into full theatrical comedy. Eleanor appears in a rational dress divided skirt, ready for cycling. Your mother shrieks as though confronted by a demon in trousers. This is the downfall of civilization. What will people think? Eleanor shrugs. That I can ride faster than them, probably. Emma claps again, delighted. The household splits into factions. Your mother muttering prayers for salvation, Eleanor defiantly pedaling around the garden, Emma running beside her chanting, "Down with corsets." Meanwhile, you watch from the veranda, torn between sympathy for your mother's horror and admiration for your daughter's courage. Even Agnes can't resist joining the fun. "If the young ladies keep this up, ma'am," she says while brushing your hair, "soon I'll be out of a job. No laces to pull, no bustles to fasten. What will I do with myself?" You laugh. "We'll find you other battles to fight, Agnes. Perhaps keeping my mother from fainting at the sight of trousers." The humor masks something deeper, real change. Your daughters are no longer whispering about rebellion in private. They're living it openly. Eleanor's health corset, Emma's outspoken mockery, their refusal to inherit the silent suffering of your generation. It's progress. But progress rarely comes without sparks. At your next social gathering, the generational clash explodes for all to see. Eleanor dares to wear her rational dress outfit in public. The whispers begin immediately. Mrs. Henderson raises her eyebrows so high they nearly disappear into her hairline. Your mother looks ready to faint without the aid of a corset. And then the coup de grace. Emma blurts, "Better rational dress than irrational fainting." The room erupts in laughter. Even a few gentlemen smirk behind their mustaches. Your mother hisses with fury, but the damage is done. The old guard looks rattled, the young feel emboldened. That night, after the guests leave, your mother delivers a final lecture. "You've allowed these girls too much freedom. Mark my words, Margaret, society will punish them." You meet her gaze, steady now in a way you weren't as a younger woman. Or society will change because of them. The generational clash leaves the household buzzing, part battlefield, part comedy stage. But beneath the sarcasm and laughter lies a truth impossible to ignore. The daughters will not accept the same burdens as their mothers. And in their defiance, they carry the impossible dream closer to reality. Time has a way of softening even the hardest corset bones. Years later, as you sit in your parlor with the late afternoon sun slanting across the carpet, you watch your daughters, and now your granddaughter, move freely in clothing that would have scandalized your own youth. And instead of horror, you feel pride. Eleanor, married and determined as ever, strides in wearing a tailored jacket and skirt that barely brushes her ankles. "Mother," she announces, "I walked the entire length of the park today without fainting, without tripping, and without once stabbing anyone with a hatpin. A miracle." Emma, never one to miss a joke, claps her hands. Civilization survives without corsets. Who would have thought? Your mother, still alive but frail, mutters from her chair. Civilization is limping along, I'll have you know. Hemlines rising, women voting, bicycles everywhere. Utter chaos. She adjusts her ancient corset stays with a wince but refuses to abandon them. Some battles end not with surrender but with sheer stubbornness. The humor of it all warms you. Once, you trembled at the thought of leaving the house without the right silhouette. Now you chuckle at memories of women fainting into orchestra pits, hatpins causing near duels on omnibuses, and men whining about stiff collars while expecting women to compress their lungs. In hindsight, it all seems absurd, a stage play of vanity. Agnes, older now but still sharp, pours tea with her usual wry smile. "Funny, isn't it, ma'am? We used to spend hours lacing you like a Christmas roast. Now the young ladies button themselves in 5 minutes and call it done." She shakes her head. "What will I do with all the time I've saved? Knit." Your granddaughter Charlotte bursts into the room, cheeks flushed from play. She leaps into your lap, something unthinkable in your tightly corseted days. "Grandmother, tell me again about the impossible dresses. The ones so heavy you could barely walk." You laugh, hugging her tightly. "Oh darling, they weren't just heavy. They were like carrying a small library on your hips. Charlotte giggles. That's silly. Why would anyone wear that? You glance at Eleanor and Emma. Exactly the question I once asked myself. And because we asked, things changed. Later, as evening settles and lamps flicker on, electric, safe, and humming, you reflect on the arc of your life. You were born into a world where beauty demanded suffering. Arsenic wafers for pale skin, belladonna drops for luminous eyes, steel and whalebone for a wasp waist. You lived through fainting spells, bruised ribs, and whispered conspiracies about rational dress. You saw servants parody the absurdity, daughters defy the rules, and society wobble between tradition and change. And now, at last, you live in a world where women can breathe deeply, stride purposefully, and even laugh at the ridiculousness of the past. It isn't paradise. There are still expectations, still new absurdities waiting to replace the old. But progress is undeniable. The legacy, you realize, isn't measured only in corset sizes or skirt lengths. It's measured in confidence, the ability of women to question, to mock, to refuse quietly or loudly. To say, as Emma once did, better rational dress than irrational fainting. That spirit, carried forward, is the true inheritance. As the family gathers for supper, Charlotte insists on wearing trousers like Eleanor's. Your mother gasps, of course, but this time the room bursts into laughter. Even Henry, mellowed with age, merely shakes his head. As long as she doesn't wear them to the Hendersons, he mutters, and everyone laughs harder. In that laughter lies victory. The once impossible dream has become everyday reality. Women breathing freely, children running unencumbered, families laughing at what was once deadly serious. Beauty without suffering, or at least beauty with choices. You lean back, breathing easily, no laces to fight, no organs displaced, no chemical powders burning your skin. For the first time, you feel entirely at home in your own body. And you know with certainty that your daughters and granddaughters will never again endure the same cage. The corset of the past is broken. The legacy of change is freedom, and perhaps just as important, the ability to laugh at the foolishness left behind.